Thank you, everybody, for joining us. You are with Chinstrap Community. I'm Saber Ibrahim, and this is my partner and co-founder, Heather Meeker.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our presentation today.
Chinstrap Community is a resource center for people who are interested in commercial open source software, whether they're a founder, an investor, a developer, or a member of the university ecosystem. We offer resources in the form of workshops, training, content, and other information to help people in their journey through the world of commercial open source software. This is a fireside chat with Juraci Paixão Kröhling. Juraci is founder and CEO of OllyGarden, which is a platform for assessing and categorizing telemetry data. Juraci's main area of interest for much of his career has been creating frameworks that enhance observability and address challenges in telemetry. To that end, he became a longtime contributor and governing board member of the OpenTelemetry project, and he founded Instrumentation Score as an open specification for assessing telemetry. He launched OllyGarden when he realized the need for tooling that made OpenTelemetry accessible to those who weren't familiar with its intricacies. So thank you very much, Juraci, for joining us today. And let's get right into it. So if we could start by telling us, how did you become interested in telemetry and the challenges around it?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and have this conversation. So the first time that I saw telemetry was very likely the first time that I wrote a line of code, because that was Hello Road. And then I checked the console and it was there. So I knew that it was working. So telemetry for me and for most developers starts when you start writing code. But really, when I changed the focus of my career to stay within the telemetry area, that was back in 2015 or so. So before that, I was working with open source already at Red Hat, but I was not working on the monitoring side. And then the team there had a change, and I decided to go into the telemetry, more specifically APM. So in 2015 or so, I started doing telemetry full-time. Back then, more specifically APM, and that eventually converged into OpenTelemetry. And I've been doing OpenTelemetry since 2019 when the project got started.
Very cool. So what led you from your interest in telemetry along the path to open source and then becoming heavily involved in the OpenTelemetry project?
Yeah, so I think open source predates telemetry for me. I started with open source as a user back when I was, 18, 19, looking at Connectiva Linux back then. I'm Brazilian, so I know Connectiva first and then the other distributions. So it's Slackware and so on and so forth. But when I got the opportunity to work at Red Hat in 2008, I grabbed the chance and I started working with open source. So that's where most of my open source ethos come from, right? So I learned the open source way at Red Hat, the philosophy of upstream first, and how to do well with open source, how to treat the community with respect. So I think this is all that I learned from Red Hat. And at Red Hat, I was at the JBoss side of the company back then. And we started doing telemetry, so monitoring for JBoss servers. So, and at some point, we were doing APM, so application performance monitoring, and we were working on a base that was getting outdated, especially because of the open tracing day. So that was 2015. So OpenTelemetry was not there, but open tracing was kind of there. So open tracing started in 16, 17 perhaps. And we saw that the base that we had was not very fitting for open tracing. So we decided to pivot from what we had into an open tracing basis. So it spans and all of that thing from the Dapper paper. And that's how I got into this OpenTelemetry community when it was not OpenTelemetry, when it was OpenTracing. So I was there for OpenTelemetry when it finally merged with OpenCensus and formed one project. So I was there and helped pick a name for the project, and I'm glad that the name was OpenTelemetry. Yeah.
So, OpenTelemetry is now part of the CNCF, and that has an interesting story. And it has an interesting story being formed out of the merger of two open source software projects. Can you talk about that journey? And in particular, I think a lot of our audience would be interested in understanding how you approached the decision to join a foundation.
Right. So one thing, so we have to go back a little bit into the open tracing days. And open tracing is a standard, or was a standard for distributed tracing. And one of the things that open tracing established was an API, a specification, and the semantic conventions. Now, around the same time, there was another project called OpenCensus. And OpenCensus followed a philosophy of batteries included, right? So it was not an API, it was not a specification. It was a project that contained everything that it needed for an open source telemetry framework. And what happened back then was some open source communities, they were waiting for a winner before they could instrument themselves with either OpenCensus or OpenTracing. So we were in this kind of weird position where we would pitch OpenTracing to some communities, and they would say, "Well, OpenCensus just came here yesterday," and they were also pitching like us to use them. And because we don't know who's the winner, we cannot know which one is going to be the winner, then we're not going to do anything at all. And that was preventing our users from being successful in observing their systems or observing what their libraries were using. So what we thought was, yes, OpenCensus and OpenTracing, they were competitors in some areas, but they come from the same heritage, so to speak. So they come from Dapper. So it was not incompatible at all. So perhaps a few things here and there needed to be adjusted. But after so many conversations between people from OpenTracing and OpenCensus, they decided to join the projects. And that's when we started with OpenTelemetry. So OpenTelemetry is the union of a project that had the philosophy of batteries included with a project that had a concept of let's make a specification and then people can do the implementation on their own. So that was a very good fit. And that is reflected even today in OpenTelemetry. So one of the philosophies that we have in OpenTelemetry is you can use a complete solution. So we give you a collector, an SDK, an API, and a specification, and semantic conventions, and so on. But you don't have to use everything at once. You can pick and choose which parts of the project you want to work with. And if you want to replace any one of those specific Lego pieces, you can do that. And it's not very difficult to do. Now, we are part of the CNCF since the very beginning because OpenTracing was part of the CNCF. So one of the things that people did right at the beginning of OpenTracing was, so OpenTracing was started by a few vendors, a few newcomers to the market. And they were seeing that a lot of the companies doing instrumentation, they're using proprietary instrumentation APIs. And they have no chance of going to those companies and offering an instrumentation API just by saying, you should move from one vendor to me, and I'm not also a vendor, but I'm just a young startup, so I might not survive. So what they did was those smaller startups back then, they joined forces and they decided to have a neutral home for the project. And that neutral home was the newly founded CNCF back then. Right, so CNCF was very new at that point, so 2017 or so, and OpenTracing was one of the first projects. So when OpenTracing joined with OpenCensus, one of the agreements that we had was OpenTelemetry is the successor of open tracing within the CNCF. So we joined the CNCF through open tracing. So open tracing today is archived under the CNCF, and OpenTelemetry is a project there. But that's how we got into the CNCF. That's through the heritage of open tracing.
Oh, thank you. So what were some of the challenges that you observed that led you to identify the opportunity of building a business around open telemetry? I think you answered that a little bit in the last question, but tell us a little more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing is, so I'm part of the governance committee for OpenTelemetry for a few years now, and that has given me access to people from the different parts of the industry, users, vendors, and other types of vendors, and so on. And one thing that I was seeing was users or companies, customers, they were complaining about cost and volume of telemetry. On the other hand, vendors were saying, you should send me even more data because I'm not receiving enough data. I cannot give you good insights about your systems if you don't send me even more data. And what I realized was this is not really a problem with the volume of data. It is about the quality of the data. So if people were sending better data to their vendors, they would get better answers and the vendors would be happy. So and nobody was working on that problem before. So either vendors were working on solutions or stopgap solutions so that they could tell their customers whether some metrics had high cardinality, perhaps, or a few things here and there. But we saw the need for an independent company in this ecosystem that could tell users and taking their interests in mind what is good and what is bad. So where is my bad telemetry? And this is why it doesn't make sense for us to be a backend. But it's also why it's so important to exist in this ecosystem independent of the backend. And in our case, we are very opinionated about OpenTelemetry, and that means we can tell people things based on our opinions within the OpenTelemetry ecosystem. So perhaps the same advice that we have for OpenTelemetry does not apply to Prometheus or to StatsD, right? So being opinionated about OpenTelemetry means that we can give very focused advice to OpenTelemetry users specifically.
So this might be, and again, you touched upon this a little bit, but costs, commercial open source software companies, they come in a few different flavors. Some companies, they own and control the open source projects upon which they are built, and others either support a pre-existing ecosystem, or they, split off and, spin off the project under a separate entity and have the commercial project under another entity. Can you talk a little bit about your particular model and sort of, why you structured it that way?
Yeah. So our model is we work very close with the OpenTelemetry community. So we understand that OpenTelemetry is provides very important set of tools for people to instrument, collect, and export their telemetry from their systems. And it is very important for them to have a vendor neutral solution so they can change backends without changing the whole instrumentation that they have in their code. So this is one of the major pillars for OpenTelemetry, that when OpenTelemetry says we are vendor neutral, it means that people don't have to replace all of the instrumentation when they change backends. Of course, they're still tied to specific things on their backends, like the dashboards and alerts and things like that, but they don't have to change the instrumentation. What we are doing is we are focused on that specific ecosystem. So we are building the tools that can help people using OpenTelemetry open source to get better telemetry, to send that data to the backends. So we think it is very important for us to be part of the community, to help the community advance the project on a good direction, and with that, bringing those benefits to the whole community, as a whole. We have no intention of owning the project. This is absolutely not possible with OpenTelemetry, right? So we are part of the CNCF, but we are also very conscious that we are not following the model where a company controls an open source project, and it is open source because it follows an open source license. But then effectively, it is a one company project. This is not the case with OpenTelemetry. We think it is very healthy for the project to have different vendors acting on the same areas of the project. And that's the only reason why OpenTelemetry is so big and can do so many things with quality as well.
So to follow up on that, in that type of model, and the benefits are as you just discussed, the maybe what are perceived as being drawbacks is that you could have multiple companies that are part of the same ecosystem that all compete with each other. So as one of those companies, how does one of those companies go about scaling that challenge or conquering that challenge?
Yeah, so OpenTelemetry provides the basic tools. So what it means is um, traditional observability backends, they would compete on who is the best company ingesting OpenTelemetry data, who is the best one making sense of OpenTelemetry data, who provides the best user experience. So they compete on the backend, and we all agree on the basics, on the tools and the frameworks that enable all of those companies to get telemetry in the first place, right? So one difficulty is how can I convince a specific company to instrument their systems or to use proprietary agents to collect telemetry in 2026 when people have an open source option for that. So today, vendors, they don't really have an option other than having open source agents to collect telemetry and open source frameworks to instrument services. And so companies traditionally, they know that they are competing on the things that OpenTelemetry is not. So it's very clear within the OpenTelemetry project where the boundaries are. So OpenTelemetry is not about the backend. OpenTelemetry does not offer visualization of data. And it's very likely that OpenTelemetry is never going to do that. Because if you open OpenTelemetry.io, the website, it says very clearly what OpenTelemetry does. So it provides the tools to instrument, transmit, collect telemetry data so that to improve the efficiency of software. But it doesn't help people in establishing SLOs or in creating alerts. Those are the things that we delegate to the backends. So people can still use Jaeger for traces or Prometheus for metrics or commercial backend for other data. In case of OllyGarden, we have quite a few things within the open source community, within OpenTelemetry, that we know are important for us. And then we assign engineers to work on those projects so that they represent not only our interests as a company, but of course, by proxy, the interests of our users, our customers.
You have these two brands, Tulip and Rose, and your commercial products, they have different brand names from from the open source software. So how do you strategize about the branding and kind of making sure the communication and messaging is consistent?
Yeah. So when I started OllyGarden, so before we had a name, I was brainstorming like what could be a good name for that. I knew that Olly had to be there. So Olly is the numeronym or O11Y is the numeronym for observability, but also for OpenTelemetry, right? So O11Y is OpenTelemetry and observability. So I knew that Olly had to be there. We replaced 11 with it else, right? So that it's easier to spell out or just to say the name. But then Olly what? Like Olly Labs, Olly what really? And looking here at from my home office, I saw my garden full of flowers and plants that I planted with my kids. I thought, OllyGarden, of course, a garden full of observability experiments. So that is the origin for the name of the company. And I think when you have a theme, it is way easier to create product names. So when we decided to do an OpenTelemetry collector distribution, then one of the good names for that would be Tulip. So Tulip has all of those petals. They're interconnected and they're beautiful together. And this is the idea behind the OpenTelemetry collector distribution. So all of those components, they're acting in one, very close together for one purpose. So Tulip is our commercially supported version of the OpenTelemetry collector. And Rose, that name was perhaps a little bit easier because Rose is also the name of a person. So we are kind of it's a personification of a AI agent. So Rose is our OpenTelemetry AI instrumentation agent. So it is even the logo of Rose has eyes. So Rose has eyes and so on. So it is both the botanical team like OllyGarden, but also the name of a person that actually goes through your code and reviews and opens pull requests to fix the instrumentation in your code. So I think going back to the main point, I think it is once we had a topic, a theme, it is way easier to create product names. And our future products, they also follow the same kind of botanical theme.
Oh, that's great. I really enjoyed that. So you and your colleagues have done a great job of growing your community around OpenTelemetry. What would you tell new open source or commercial open source founders about that? What strategies did you use to grow the community and the contributor base?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I think it's I think there's a mix of things in there. I think the most important thing is and I've been saying that since, I don't know, 2009 or so, coding is easy, collaboration is hard, right? So making a source, an open source, like making the code and make it open source is easy. You just toggle an option on GitHub and it's public. But building the community or collaborating with people, that's the hard part. Like viewing other person's point of view when reviewing a pull request or accepting other opinions or other ways of doing, or being the owner of a project and then somebody disagreeing with your direction. This all belongs to open source. This is all collaboration. So this is one of the things that that people starting new open source projects have to think about. If they're not open to that, just make it clear then. Like make it clear that contributions are not welcome. That it is open source, but only if you fork it and you work on your own fork. That's also fine, right? I mean, as the owner of a project or of a code, I can decide what to do with that. And it's fine not to accept contributions as long as it's very clear that this is not the case. It's very frustrating to an user to open a pull request and never get it reviewed, and the project owner never having the intention of even reviewing that. So it's not only not reviewing, but not having the intention of reviewing. But I think what really mattered to OpenTelemetry was perhaps a couple of things as well. One is outreach. Like we've been going to conferences such as KubeCon since the very beginning. So we've been talking about OpenTelemetry. We've been talking to end users. We've been talking to a lot of people twice a year, right? So for Europe and North America, we've been going to those conferences, meetups, and so on and so forth. And not, of course, not only me. I mean, I'm just one of those contributors to OpenTelemetry, but people have been doing conference talks and publishing blog posts and cases for OpenTelemetry for a long time. So coding, again, is the easy part. Everything around the project is what really needs time, and it's not only the 1 or 2 hours investment that we make, but it is really the long-term investment in the project. And I think in particular to OpenTelemetry, what was important was it was recognized from the very beginning that there is no single vendor that controls the project. And because of that, it's way easier to attract other vendors and make the project successful to people out there at such a base level. So OpenTelemetry is very close to the source code to the users, and companies out there, they they're very conscious about adding vendor lock-in straight into their code. And if it is an open source framework for that, and an open source that is from a neutral home, that makes it way easier. So in our case, having a lot of vendors, a lot of people from the industry coming and helping us, that provided the assurance to our users that we're not going to lock you in. This is not a project that is dying soon once a company doesn't get like the next round of funding. Right. So this is really a project that is truly community and truly surviving the next few years.
That's great. So you're a CNCF ambassador. Tell us what that means, what it involves, and how did it help your experiences for the growth of commercial open source and the open source project?
Yeah, I became an ambassador um, because of all of the activities that I've been doing within OpenTelemetry. Um, to be a CNCF ambassador, there are really several avenues to that. One is becoming a code contributor, and a contributor that is interested in growing the project, in growing the ecosystem as a whole. So not only your specific part of the project, but also other parts. Another way of becoming a CNCF ambassador is by going to conferences and talking about the project. So my path of becoming a CNCF ambassador involved all of that. So both the coding aspect or the maintainer side of the things, reviewing pull requests and talking to users and helping out users on Slack or on Stack Overflow and whatnot, but also going to conferences and talking to people, up to doing the manual work, doing the things that nobody's doing, doing the governance work, and all of that counts, right? So just become and it's funny because once I became an ambassador, then it also gave me even more strength into being in doing even more for the project. So after becoming an ambassador, I started organizing an event here in Berlin called Hotel Night. And if you happen to be in Berlin in a couple of weeks' time, we have another one here. So Google Hotel Night for that. But it is one of the things that I'm doing that sometimes I even ask myself, like, why am I doing that? It's so much work. And I'm doing that on the free time and so on. But it gives me, it makes my heart warmer a little bit to go there and talk to people without any commercial interest, just going there to talk about OpenTelemetry to the folks. So, yeah.
You know, that's really interesting. On that note, how do you navigate, or I should ask, are there ever tensions that come up, whether it's tensions within yourself or, tensions with others perhaps, and maybe this is a bit of a delicate question, but tensions regarding, okay, am I doing this for the project? Am I doing this for the company? Am I doing this for, the wider technical realm? And how do you navigate those kinds of tensions with yourself and also potentially maybe with others if and when they do arise?
This is a really good question. This is a really good point. I do have those conflicts myself. I like to think that I have different hats, right? So there is a time where I'm wearing the CNCF ambassador hat. There is a time that I'm wearing the GC hat, the governance committee hat. There's another one that I'm wearing the collector maintainer hat. And sometimes the governance committee person, like the Juraci that is a governance committee person, is not in agreement with the Juraci who's a collector maintainer. And that has happened in the past, like concretely. Then there is myself wearing the OllyGarden hat and so on and so forth. So I think the first step is recognizing that we have different hats, that we are wearing different hats, and we have different interests depending on which hat we are wearing. And whenever we find ourselves in a position where we cannot either judge things or say things without being mistaken, we have to be very clear to the people we're talking to which hat we are wearing right now. And quite often, especially during the GC calls that are recorded so people can watch it, I say, as a collector maintainer or as a governance member, my opinion is this. And it makes it very clear to people. There are situations where my opinions might be different than those of the company that I'm working for at the moment. So I remember a situation when I was at Grafana, and there was a discussion about the collector. So I had 3 different opinions depending on which hat I had. So my Grafana opinion, my OpenTelemetry collector opinion, and my governance committee opinion. And when the community could see one of those opinions as biased towards the company, I would in that specific situation, I said, I'm going to recuse myself from that discussion from that perspective. I'm going to invite somebody else from Grafana to take Grafana's position in that discussion. So I don't want myself to be defending conflicting parts of the same decision. It is delicate and it's not easy. There has been situations in the community in the past where people would think, is that person talking really what they think, or are they defending a position from their employers or from like that has happened? Like those questioning moments, they happened in the past. And I think it is very important for the community to be able to talk straight to each other and say, be able to ask directly, which hat are you wearing? Like, do you really think that? Or like, be clear, be transparent. And because so perhaps OllyGarden is in a different position because we don't have competitors within OpenTelemetry. Like we are acting on a specific part that nobody else is working. But we have seen in the past situations where specific vendors would come into the community and make specific contributions just be blocked by other companies from other vendors. And that blocking be seen as blocking competition. But when you go into the details of the situation, when you talk to the people involved, we are all engineers and we all have opinions. And if you lock like 10 engineers in a room and look for one solution, you get 11 solutions. And this is the same in open source, right? So talking to each other and making things clear helps a lot. But yeah, those tensions, they do come from time to time.
Yeah, I think that those are some excellent points you made, and this is something that we come across in terms of both the founders we advise through Chinstrap, as well as Heather and I in our personal legal practices, is that how do maintainers and governing people who are also entrepreneurs in their own right, how do they kind of navigate those tensions when they arise, and what are the sort of the mechanisms that are used to make sure that no conflicts come about? That's probably a subject for a podcast in and of itself. Shifting to the business side of things, can you talk a little bit about when you founded OllyGarden and you started structuring your commercial offerings? How did you go about developing your revenue model and deciding on pricing and offerings and plans and things like that?
We're still figuring that out. I think this is the honest answer, right? So we have a theory. We have a theory about revenue. We have a theory about pricing. And so far it resonates with the people that we've been talking to. One thing that we know for sure is some of the people who are using OpenTelemetry and are not using some backends are not doing that because they have so much data, so much telemetry that they just cannot afford to send this data out through the network. So this is one situation. So we decided right at the beginning that we would not be charging per data volume, not for insights, not for Tulip, not for rows. For rows, we are seeing, so rows is our OpenTelemetry AI coding agent. So rows can do instrumentation of code and so on. And in that area, I'm coding agents and so on. It's very common to charge for tokens, right? And one thing that we've been seeing is tokens. It is so abstract. Like, I don't know how many tokens I need to do a task before I actually do the task. So I don't know how much I'm going to pay for that. And that gives me anxiety when I'm developing code. I don't want our customers to have that anxiety. I don't want them to think about, am I going to afford rows or not if I run this pull request here. So for rows, we are charging a per repository model, and eventually we're going to get into an amount that is on average good for both sides, right? So provides good value, and we can also make money out of that. In terms of Tulip, it is a little bit more complicated. So for Tulip, we know how many collectors companies are using. So Tulip is our OpenTelemetry collector distribution. So we ask people, like, how many collectors do you have running? How much support do you need? Do you need only a number to call? Do you need a number to call and open 10 issues whenever they come? Or are you okay in having one issue at a time opened? And that sets the pricing for them. So if they can work with one ticket at a time with no phone to call, then that's a fixed price. If it's a big enterprise and they need more than that, they need follow the sun support and things like that, that is then a special pricing for them. And for insights, it's also quite easy. I mean, because we're not a backend, we don't have to ingest everything. Then we charge a specific amount for what we're calling essentials a tier, the essentials plan. We give for free, or for free we give the PII detection, for instance. But we rate limit by 100 requests per second, which is quite generous, but it's still that's a limitation. And at the other side of the spectrum, we have enterprise again. So if companies if they have terabytes of data a day, then the sampling that we do might not be sufficient to detect all of the issues they have. So this is basically the revenue model and how we are doing pricing. But we've changed quite a few times already. So we made a lot of theories throughout time, and we saw what made people comfortable as well. So it has to make sense for us as a business, but it also has to make people comfortable. Because if people don't know how much they're going to pay, it's just not very good for the ecosystem as a whole, I would say.
So that's interesting. I think you touched upon some important points there, and the pricing question is something that all entrepreneurs struggle with, not just open source, but in proprietary software as well. Can you talk about, to what extent does feedback on the open source side inform the pricing discussion? I know that some open source entrepreneurs, they'll say, they'll look at feedback that they get on the open source project, and they'll say, a contributor, a user will say it would be great if the software did X, and the entrepreneur will say, well, you know what, X would be a great idea for a paid feature. So I'm sure you've come across those types of challenges, and if you could talk a little bit about how you address them.
Yeah, I think the key thing there is it going to be something that is going to cost me more? Like SOC 2 is a great example, right? So if my software is open source and you are going to run it on your own, and you need SOC 2, then you certify for SOC 2. But if you need me to certify, to have my backend certified for SOC 2, and to provide you with a document proving that I'm certified, then that costs me more. So that's a enterprise feature. Typically, what I've seen in the past is if I need SSO, or if I need integration with a commercial backend, that means you are willing to pay and you are paying somebody, and I'm gonna, I think I deserve also to be paid for that. Right? So things that are good for the whole community, things that make sense for open source, they go open source. But a lot of the things that are very enterprisey, they become part of the paid solution. In our case, of course, OpenTelemetry, it doesn't matter. It is all open source. Even Tulip, our distribution of the collector, everything is open source. Everything is out there. The components we developed, they're also open source. It is not a differentiation for us to have those components closed source. We're not going to lose businesses because of that. If we were, then perhaps we would be making that open source. And I guess the other way to answer this question is our Insights platform is not open source, not right now. And we might make it open source in the future. And the reason is open source is complicated, right? I mean, one move that you make in going wider in terms of like, I'm going to make everything open source, then you might find yourself not having enough differentiation between the commercial and the open source and the free open source solution. And then you don't survive as a company. So the way, and we've seen companies being too wide at the beginning. I don't know if I can give examples, but I think everybody can think about the examples. But companies going too wide at the beginning and then having to change licenses to something more restrictive, non-OSI approved licenses and things like that, only to backtrack on that decision later, right? So they go back and say, you know what, that was a mistake. Open source again. We've seen that. I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that. I don't want to. I think this is my personal opinion. This feels to me like pulling the rug. Like it is changing the rules of the game while it's being played. And I don't want to do that for OllyGarden. So I prefer to stay closed source for a while on the inside side, on the Rose side. And once it's very clear what is open source and what is commercial, then we make it open source, right? So I come from Red Hat since 2008. Been doing open source. Open source runs in my veins. So I need OllyGarden to do open source as well. That's a pride point for me. But I also want to be doing the right thing. I want to go and not come back.
Sticking with the commercial discussion or the business discussion. So all entrepreneurs, when they raise money for their startups, particularly early in their fundraising journey, they talk to all kinds of investors, some of whom might actually, turn out to not be a great fit. So I assume you've talked to investors who, some of whom have a great background in open source and don't even ask about the open source issues, and some of whom, maybe not so great background in open source, but a good background in sort of the technical realm. So how does the subject of OllyGarden being an open source company, how does that come up in your fundraising discussions with investors and potential investors? And in what way does OpenTelemetry OllyGarden status as a cost company come up in those conversations?
We got so our best leads in terms of investors came from people we know from the open source world, and they are VCs, they're investors that understand open source. So we decided to close with Dig Ventures. So Dig Ventures is the lead investor for our pre-seed, and we decided to go with them because they understand observability. So they have their company in the observability in their portfolio within the observability ecosystem. But also more importantly, they understand open source. They understood OpenTelemetry already. And when they heard that we were starting something around OpenTelemetry, they got very interested. They see OpenTelemetry as bigger than today, but also OpenTelemetry is already important in the market. So there is a market already for OpenTelemetry, and that market is going to be even bigger tomorrow. So it was very important for us as well to get an investor that understands open source. And there are quite a few VCs out there that understand open source, right? So quite a few of them, they invest in open core kind of companies or commercial open source companies out there. But yes, there are most of the VCs out there, they don't really get open source. Quite often we got the question that, how are you going to make money if everything is free? How does that have a future? And so for people who are basing their businesses around open source, it is harder, right, to make this point, to make to get the message across. And I think it is also very good for founders to think like, how am I gonna why is open source important to me? Is it important because it is a marketing tool? Like, am I gonna use open source as marketing? Or is it the distribution problem that I'm trying to solve? So I'm trying to get my software running at the most places as possible right now, and then I figure something out. Or do I have a model where which is where we started. We started with a model that we make everything open source, and then because we know how to run it, we run it more efficiently than you do, so we can run it for you. All right. So this is the classic, the Grafana model, the Red Hat model. So if you can run Linux on your own, that's fine. But if you need some support, then you buy from Red Hat. The same for Grafana, right? So because we run at scale, because we develop this software, we know how to run it more efficiently than you do. You have to pay 2 or 3 engineers to run it. And our licenses or our cloud or SaaS cost less than that. So it's more efficient to pay us to run it for you. I guess the whole point is it has to be very clear from the very beginning why you need that to be open source. And once it is clear to you, you can then very efficiently convey this message or prepare this message to the investors. I think what was even more important than having that story was having the option to give to the investors. Like, I'm going this way because of this, and that. What we told investors when we were doing the pitches was, we are gonna. It's exactly what I told you in a few minutes before, right? So we are gonna do eventually open source, but we need to figure out the monetization strategy first. Like we first learn how to make money out of this, and then we open source the things here and there.
Yeah, so with open source, there is always a lot of pressure to add features. People comment all the time, I wish there was this feature, I wish that there was that feature, and it's an easy thing for them to ask for because it will cost you a lot of time and work. So how do you figure out how to prioritize those requests and how to focus your development efforts?
Yeah, I think that's an easy one. At least from the time that I was even closer to the collector, my default question would be, are you open to submitting a PR, a pull request? And sometimes people wouldn't even bother to answer the question. And that is a no, right? I mean, I'm not going to develop something for you if you're not even bothering to answer one question. But I think the main idea is, it is just like a product development, right? So the first time that people ask you for something, you say no. The second time, you say no again. But then eventually, enough people are going to ask for the same feature, and then you think, you know what? I think it might be a good idea to implement that. If you just implement every single idea that you get, you end up with a bloated software with 99% of the features that nobody cares, right? So yeah, the full answer is no to everything. And then when in open source, when people come in and you ask them, like, are you open to doing the change and then building the future on your own? And if they say yes, even then we might end up saying no, because the next question is then, are you going to stick around to maintain that code? Because again, writing the code is the easy part. Maintaining over the long run is the hard part. And we see that in the collector even today. OpenTelemetry collector has literally hundreds of components, and some of them are better maintained than others, right? So by default, we say, eventually we end up saying, we're not going to accept new components without a current maintainer being a sponsor for that new code. So if this contributor stops contributing or just disappears or changes jobs, then somebody from within the project, somebody who we know for a long time, is able to maintain that code, has an interest in maintaining that code. So this became a barrier, healthy barrier, for us to accept or to refuse specific features.
Well, that's
So I guess the answer is
great
Joe.
stuff.
No,
Yeah, I like that. I know that many accountants struggle with this a lot. So we did have a question from the audience. So can you speak a little bit more about the interplay between the development of implied standards and the wider ecosystem?
Yeah, this is a good question, because OpenTelemetry, we decided, for good or for worse, to start our own standard, right? So OTLP is a specification that was created based out of nothing really. Like it is okay. So not nothing. A lot of that. So I going back one step. I think I alluded before that both OpenTelemetry, Open Tracing and Open Census, they have the same heritage, and that's a Dapper paper, and that came from Google. So both projects, they share this history of learning from Google's scale, Google's mistakes, and Google's successes in terms of telemetry. So OTLP is a reflection of that in some areas. Now, so it's not like OTLP or OpenTelemetry as a whole just came out of nowhere. But it is true that there were some de facto standards in the industry when OpenTelemetry or Open Tracing before that came out. So perhaps not so much for tracing. So for tracing, there wasn't really anything as widely adopted as Open Tracing became. But for metrics and for logs, there were. And but I think the one thing that I believe was right for OpenTelemetry was, because we have a standard for tracing, we need a similar mental model for the other signals. So the notion of resource attributes, for instance, like going very, very technical now, but the notion of resource attributes, it is one of the key things for OpenTelemetry. And the other signals, metrics and logs, they have to support the same kind of notion, so that I can jump from traces to metrics to logs and back. So this is a key tenet for OpenTelemetry. Now, that means we had to break from the de facto standards from then, like Prometheus and StatsD, or in terms of logs, like syslogs or rsyslog, and so on and so forth. That was unfortunate, but at the same time, we had this idea from the very beginning of OpenTelemetry that we want to interoperate with existing systems. So you could, from the very beginning, inject or scrape Prometheus data from your Prometheus infra and send that data out to your backend, whatever that backend might be. So I think we are conscious that there were standards before, but it was also very important to make the project, the different parts of the project, to interoperate with themselves, and then build the bridges to interoperate with the ecosystem as a whole. I don't know if that goes into all the parts of the. I know it's a complicated topic, like it is. We hear it quite a lot, and I've seen the XKCD comic with the 14 standards, and then suddenly there are 15 standards. This is certainly the case with OpenTelemetry as well. But I think it is for a good reason. And I think things evolve over time, and things change. I think one thing that is very important to understand or to realize about OpenTelemetry is that it is not a representation of the backend. It is only how telemetry is collected and how telemetry is transmitted. So how you store that data it doesn't matter to OpenTelemetry. And that's a key thing, like, because we don't care about how data is stored in StatCD databases or in Prometheus databases. We have to work with both. And that means, and it pains my heart to say that, but it also means that we are not very good at any one of those. Like, there are better solutions for Prometheus and there are better solutions for StatCD. But if you don't know what is your backend, if you want to move from one to another in the future, then you might want to use OpenTelemetry. And yes, 927. That's the one. Yes.
That's
XKCD
my
927.
favorites too.
Yeah.
I just put the XKCD comic in the chat here. It's a well-known comic about how standards develop and
Yeah.
splinter. But
Exactly.
yeah, thanks. I mean, that's always a difficult question and very fact specific. So thanks for talking about it.
Yeah, I would definitely prefer if we had one standard, but I think the fact that there is no single way to store telemetry in the first place means that there is no way that all of the engineers are going to agree on one way of doing things.
Juraci, thank you. This was great. Lastly, we wanted to give you an opportunity to, tell us a little bit about what's next for OllyGarden and what you have coming up on the roadmap as of today, January 22nd, 2026. And if you could also tell us about the event in Berlin that you have coming up in 2 weeks.
Absolutely, yes. So February 12th, if I'm not mistaken, we have an event here in Berlin, and we have 2 talks with 3 speakers, and they're users of OpenTelemetry. So we try to get users of OpenTelemetry at those events. Vendor neutral, we follow the OpenTelemetry philosophy there. So no vendors or nobody selling anything, just really people sharing their experiences. If you're interested, the website is here in the chat, so I left a link there. Otherwise, Google for CNCF Cloud Native Berlin, and then there is an event there called Hotel Night. What's next for OllyGarden? So we are wrapping up a few. So we are moved by KubeCons. So we are targeting the next KubeCon with the next pack of features for OllyGarden. We are giving a lot of focus to rows at the moment, because we are very good at finding bad telemetry already. So we have opinions and we know where to find bad telemetry. We know where PII is. We know how to find broken traces and so on and so forth. But one thing that people have been asking is, okay, so now how do I fix it? And rows is the party that goes and fixes the issues. So we are focusing on having rows to fix those issues. And we are also having a new version of Tulik very soon, so in February. And all of that done by KubeCon. So by KubeCon, our UI is going to have a better integration with rows as well. So people can just click a button in the UI and rows fix the issue on the GitHub repositories. And post KubeCon, then we have other news or new projects, new products. And hopefully we have our seed funding done just after KubeCon as well.
Juraci, once again, thank you very much. This was excellent. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights and your experiences. Thank you to those of you who dialed in today. Once again, we're with Chinstrap Community. I'm Saber, and this is my co-founder, Heather. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up with Chinstrap Community. Our workshop for founders, workshop on costs for founders, starts 1 week from today. That is, 1 week from today, January 22nd, 2026. And we've still got some slots left. The link is on our website. We've got a Discord server that we invite everybody to join. We also operate a directory of commercial open source software startups called Cosmology. That's linked from our website. And yeah, thank you very much for joining. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We love hearing from our audience. And yeah, thanks again and take care.